All right. Hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development Program, and in particular the AWD1111 .NET Framework with Web Databases class, I've been creating a series of video presentations for the textbook that's going to be used for this class for the fall 2019 semester. As you can see on the screen, the textbook is Pro ASP.NET MVC5 in A-Press text by Adam Freeman. I'm working my way through Chapter 16, and I'm up to generating outgoing URLs and action methods. And the author says here, mostly you will need to generate outgoing URLs and views, but there are times you may need to do something similar inside of an action method. This can be achieved using the same helper method used in the view. So we've got to go back to our home controller, and after our custom variable, method, we will go in and add yet another method. All right, my action method. And notice they're not really doing a whole heck of a lot with it. All right. For the routing example, the myAction URL would be set to home index myID, and the route URL variable would be set to /, which is consistent with the results that calling these helpers in a view would produce. A more common requirement, as mentioned here on page 428, is to redirect the client browser to another URL, which can be achieved with the redirect to action method. All right. So you'll notice if we do this, redirect to route, okay, what that's going to do is it's going to send us back in the same controller to the index method. All right. This is in home controller. I don't think we've got that in there. Nope. Oh, we've already got a myAction method. Well, what if we put in there myAction method too? There we go. All right. The result of the redirect to action method is a redirect to route result, which instructs the MVC framework to issue a redirect instruction to the URL to invoke the correct action. All right. Generating a URL from a specific route. Bottom half of page 428. In the previous examples, we left the routing system to select the route used to generate a URL or link. In this section, you are shown how you can control the process and select specific routes. So what we've done here, in our register routes, right near the top, we now have this. I think we've already got the routes.map, but let's double check. Oops. Yep, but we'll add this. Oh, no, I've got that in there twice. Try it again. There we go. Now we've got the my route controller action here and here, which we probably wouldn't want to do, but we'll just leave it there for now. There are two routes in this configuration, and we have specified names for both routes, my route and map route. There are two reasons for naming your routes. Number one, for lack of better words, they say as a reminder, I change that to it makes your program more self-documenting. All right. And number two, so that you can select a specific route to be used to generate an outgoing URL. The author has arranged the routes so that the least specific appears first in the list. This means we were to generate a list, an action method like this, the outgoing thing would look like this, but we can override that. You can also give names to the routes in the route with the route attribute, and they show an example right here. And notice that after the author mentions that, on the bottom of page 429, he mentions why you might not want to do that. And as he says here, the problem with relying on route names to generate outgoing URLs is that doing so breaks that separation of concerns that we've talked about previously. All right, next is customizing the routing system. Should be fine here, and I am. Okay. We have seen how flexible and configurable the route system is, but if it does not meet your requirements, you can customize it. And in this section, the author shows you two ways of doing this. The author says here, if you do not like the way the standard route objects match URLs, or you want to implement something, he says unusual, let's just say different, you can derive an alternative class from route base. This alternative class will give you control over how URLs are matched, how parameters are extracted, and how outgoing URLs are generated. To do this, you need to implement two methods. Get route data, which as it says is the mechanism by which inbound URL matching works, and get virtual path, which is the mechanism for how outbound URL generation works. All right. To demonstrate this, on page 430, the author says he's going to create a route-based class that will handle legacy URL requests. To begin, we need a controller that will receive these. So we have to create a controller called legacy controller. So let's start with this. Let's just copy this. Go over to here, go over to our controllers, right mouse click, add controller. It will be empty, and it will be called legacy controller. We will take what comes up momentarily. And put this in here instead, as is shown on the middle of page 430. In this simple controller, the getLegacy action method takes the parameter and passes it to a model as a view model to the view. If I were implementing this controller in a real project, the author says, I would use this method to retrieve the files that were requested. But as is, I'm simply going to display the URL in the view. All right, so we want to create a view off of this, getLegacy URL.cshtml. within the Views Legacy folder. I'm not sure if we can do it like this, but let's try anyway. Let's see. We're not told exactly how to do this. So I'm going to, here, I'm going to right mouse click, choose Add View, leave everything to the defaults, and it should create getLegacy URL. Okay, looks good to me. Here's the contents. I want to demonstrate the custom route behavior, so I'm not going to spend any time creating complicated actions and views. We just display the model view. We have now reached the point where we can create a custom derivation of the route-based class. All right, so we're here on page 431. I added a class file to the infrastructure folder called legacyroute.cs. There it is, and as the author mentions here, he says, this is where I like to put support classes that do not really belong anywhere else. You know, again, this is the way the author does it. That by no means means that this is the way that you have to do it. All right, so we've got some of our code here on page 431 and some more of it on page 432. As always, we're going to get a ton of errors here because we've only got some of the code here. All right, they've all gone. That's good. And the author mentions there in the text, right underneath the code that's here, okay, the constructor of the class takes a string array that represents the individual URLs that this routing class will support. The author has specified these, or will specify these, when registering the route later. Of note in this class is the getRoute data method that you see right here. This is what the routing system calls to see if the legacy route class can match an incoming URL. And as the author mentions here, if the class cannot match the request, we're just going to return no. All right. For the vast majority of MVC applications, this is the class that you will require as it connects the routing system to the controller action model of an MVC app. The last step is to register the new route that uses the custom base. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to come into our route config, and up here the first thing we want to do is we want a using statement. So we want using URLs and routes dot infrastructure. All right. And then inside of our register routes, right underneath here, all right, we want to go and put in this. Right there. Now I want to give you my own take on this. All right. The author is going to mention this in much more depth and breadth of coverage himself. But we have created a new instance of the legacy route class and passed in the URLs. But I believe the reason we must put them at the top like that is in case down below in the standard routing mechanism, if we have something by the same name. All right. Generating outgoing URLs on page 433. To support outgoing URL generation, we need to implement the getVirtualPath method in the legacy route class. If the class is unable to generate a specific URL, we let the routing system know by returning null. Otherwise, an instance of the virtual path data class is returned. So this is in our legacy route.cs. And this is our virtual path data. Now you don't have to do this, but I'm going to just hit enter and just line this stuff up a little bit. All right, to me it makes it much easier to read. You may or may not agree. All right, we've got return result and return null. Something is hosed there. That's pretty obvious. All right, since we've set that to null right here, we can return the result, and if nothing has happened, that should work fine anyway, because it'll be null. All right. The author says here on the top of page 434, I have been passing segment variables and other details around in earlier chapters using anonymous types. But behind the scenes, the routing system has been converting these into route value dictionary objects. So they want us to go back into the action name CS. Let's do this. All right, we've been using that. I'm going to, what did I do here? Yep. I'm going to comment this out. Paste that in. When the view is rendered by the action link helper, when it should generate the URL that's shown here on the middle of page 434, that being this. The anonymous type created with a legacy URL property should be converted into a route value dictionary class that contains a key of the same name. All right. Let's do a, not there. In our code, let's do a file save all. Let's try to run this. And as I'm going through this, I'm most concerned that I'm not breaking anything. Like that. A route named my route is already in this collection. Okay. Should have guessed that myself. So again, we will comment that out. Try to. I think I've got to stop the run before I can comment that out. All right. Legacy routes, my route, my other route, new route. Not sure right now looking at this why it's not working. I took the my route that was in there and got rid of it. But I'm just going to leave it right there. Hopefully at least somewhat you're getting the idea. Again, how much of this we're going to run through in class, I'm not real sure, to be honest with you. So I'm going to leave it here on the bottom of page 434, creating a custom route handler.